I call Stuart Nash.
Thank you much, Mr Speaker. It is interesting to listen to the National Party speak on this bill because they herald it as a major piece of legislation, yet they can't even speak for 10 minutes on it. I'm not too sure if that shows their lack of knowledge around the details of the bill or their lack of enthusiasm for the bill itself or what it does. But whatever it is, Mr Speaker, I think it's quite poor form. Mr Speaker, I do stand in support of the Auditor Regulation Bill and the Financial Reporting Amendment Bill because it does most important work in restoring the confidence of New Zealanders in our financial markets and our capital markets. But, Mr Speaker, before I continue, if you may indulge me the right just to correct or to comment on something a member had said recently. I think, Mr Speaker, that Sandra Gowdy may have given out some budget secrets a couple of weeks too early or a week too early because what she said, Mr Speaker, when she was speaking on the last bill, she thanked the dairy industry because it provided all the money to pay for, she thanked for their hard work and all the money because they paid for our health, education and social welfare systems. Well, Mr Speaker, they paid $26 million in tax out last year. I'm wondering if the budgets of the health, social welfare and education are going to be slashed to $26 million. But anyway, I digress, Mr Speaker. What I would like to do is thank the Honourable Simon Power, the Minister who brought this bill to the House. It's a very good bill. He's a very hard-working minister. In fact, I think it was Simon Bridges who told the House that, in fact, Mr Power has been responsible, I think Simon Bridges said, for over 40% of the bills brought before the House. 40% of the bills brought before this House, Mr Speaker. He certainly is a hard-working minister, and I suspect that is the reason he has decided to resign, Mr Speaker. He is sick to death of carrying the National Party. Having said that, Mr Power's plan for getting the country out of problem is to sell state assets. He is the man that's been put up with the policy to sell state assets.
Order.
And I wonder if this is a bit of a poison chalice.
Order. I brought the attention of the member before. This is a third reading speech, and you can only comment on what's in the bill. And I refer the member to Speaker's rulings. There's a number of them, but on page 117, I'll ask the member to come back to the content of the bill. Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As I was saying, Simon Power, the hard-working minister, has done a good job of continuing the work that the Honourable Leanne Dalzell started and heralded through the Commerce Select Committee. Now, specifically, the bill recognises that audits of companies that manage public investments or otherwise obtain large amounts of money from the public must be performed by registered members of the auditing profession. Now, it's a very good question. Why does the regulation of auditors need to be reformed? It's a very good question because the answer is that, Mr Speaker, 69 finance companies have gone broke since the global financial crisis. 69. And I understand it's taken out about $6 billion of savings from good, hard-working New Zealanders. These are people who want to retire, who put money away for their grandchildren's education, and this was ripped out. So what's happened, Mr Speaker, is financial reporting is hugely important to investors. My colleague David Parker earlier on talked about the need for investors to have confidence in the professionals that are charged with ensuring that these documents meet the required standard. As Mr Clendon mentioned in his short 10-minute speech, you cannot legislate for incompetence, but I'd say, Mr Speaker, and it's my contention, that when investors are making an investment decision, incompetence is not one of the variables, in fact, that they should have to take into account when assessing risk. But in fact, Mr Speaker, what happened is in a lot of these 69 finance companies, there were incompetent people who were undertaking to provide professional advice, and that is one of the reasons, Mr Speaker, why these companies fell over. Now, what I don't want to do is to taint every single auditor, because there were a lot of good auditors out there. In fact, there are a lot of very good auditors. In fact, they welcome this bill, Mr Speaker. They welcome this bill because what this bill does is it removes a lot of those sort of charlatans out of the profession. It gets rid of those people who called themselves professional but acted in everything but a professional way. Yeah. New Zealand's self-regulatory model is no longer, was no longer, within the range of acceptable auditor regulation systems. New Zealand needed to change in order to obtain the right to practice in Australia and other jurisdictions such as the European Union. And my colleague David Parker elaborated this, so I won't go into too much detail. But the purpose of an audit, the actual purpose of an audit, is to provide assurance to investors, to regulators, and to other market participants that a set of financial statements is free from material error. It's quite an important consideration because business decisions will need to be made on the basis of financial statements. And so it's important that audit firms have a very strong reputation. I don't think that's doubted by anyone. In the last 6 months, Mr. Speaker, the disciplinary tribunal of the New Zealand Institute of Accountants has made orders against 4 members who between them led 5 failed finance company audits. The tribunal found that those audits were not carried out in accordance with the Institute's ethical, professional and auditing standards. Mr. Speaker, it's these sorts of people that this bill will weed out. Because, Mr. Speaker, the penalty for breaching this Act is actually $50,000. For overseas auditors registered in New Zealand, it's $10,000. That's something we discussed at select committee, in committee stage, but it's $50,000. And I think that sends a very strong message that, in fact, every single member of this House recognises that there needed to be change, and this bill provides that change. This bill provides the licensing of auditors that will be carried out by the Institute of Chartered Accountants and by any other professional accounting body that may be accredited by the Financial Markets Authority. Now, the Financial Market Authority will set a minimum licensing standards to oversee the professional accounting bodies and be responsible for practice reviews. Now, what is the Financial Market Authority? Well, it's a newly constructed market or regulator for New Zealand's financial markets. I mean, pretty much what it is what the title says it is. It officially started on the 1st of May this year, so it's very new. And the FMA performs the regulatory functions currently undertaken by the Securities Commission and some of those, previously undertaken by the Securities Commission and some of those by the Government Actuary and Companies Office. The Financial Markets Authority Act established the Financial Market Authority, which we supported, of course. In fact, I think every member in this House supported. And the Financial Market Authority has powers, functions and duties that its predecessors did not, including, for example, the power to exercise an investor's right to take civil action against a financial market participant, the ability to prevent products from being structured to avoid being supervised by the FMA, and enhanced warning powers. It's not the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, Mr. Speaker. It's sort of at the top of the cliff. It's the overview. If there's anything that looks wrong, that doesn't look right, the Financial Market Authority can actually step in at any point in time and say, OK, we require change, or we need to see what's going on here, or we need to audit this practice. It's a very powerful body, Mr. Speaker. And as again my colleague David Parker alluded to, we hope that it actually undertakes the powers in which it has been granted in a prudent manner. The reform, I just want to wrap up, Mr. Speaker, by saying the reform represents another important part of this Parliament's ongoing work programme to restore investor confidence in our financial sector, in our capital markets. And the review, and it includes other things, for example, like the review of securities law started under Leanne Dalzell. The Commerce Committee, chaired very ably by Leanne Dalzell, did recommend a number of amendments to improve the bill, to strengthen the bill. We went through these in the committee stage. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this is quite an unusual bill because we are now passing 2 bills, whereas in committee stage it merged into 1 bill because they're very similar in nature. It's why they're being read as one. But it is a very important piece of legislation. I think it will be. I think it will go a considerable way to really restoring the confidence of the New Zealand public in our capital markets and our financial sector, and that is one of the very main reasons why I support this bill. Thank you very much.
I call Melissa Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a comment.